Hey everyone, at a friend's request, I'm putting together a quick video on a couple of, I guess you would call them gastrointestinal issues. So the topics we're going to try to talk briefly about today are gastroparesis, IBS, and celiac disease, and what the differences of those are. Now, this should go without saying, but I'm going to go ahead and state it anyway. If you think that you have one or more of these conditions, you absolutely should see a physician to be properly diagnosed for treatment and everything along those lines. I'm going to talk about it just from the base knowledge that I have from working with some clients that have struggled with these issues. So gastroparesis is typically genetic, but not always, and it's a delayed gastric emptying, and what you can basically do is minimize the symptoms. From the little bit of research I've done, I don't know that it's a curable condition. Again, that's a question for a physician. I've got a few other notes here. I know also that there is some electrical stimulation and anti-nausea medicine that they recommend that will help with things. But some of the most important things that I've found is eating very small meals throughout the day, no more than a cup and a half at a time. Being sure to hydrate, because dehydration increases nausea, and people with gastroparesis do have a lot of nausea and vomiting. It's important to sip and not gulp. Again, small amounts of liquid and food at a time. You can also blend or puree your meals and drink them, as liquid is more tolerable, and it's also well cooked. You want to make sure all your foods are well cooked. Raw is not very tolerable for people with this condition. Walking after eating is extremely important. You do not want to lay down or even lay back. You want to either be sitting up or moving after you eat for a while to make sure that your food helps your food digest, and you want to minimize fat and fiber, because again, that slows the process, and gastric emptying is already a delayed process. No carbonation and no alcohol is important with gastroparesis. Additionally, you just want to make sure that you're getting enough nutrients because of the vomiting and sometimes the diarrhea that goes along with gastroparesis. Okay, celiac is typically an allergy to gluten, and it typically takes place in the small intestines, and the best way to deal with that is total avoidance of gluten. And those products of gluten are wheat, rye, and barley. And some of the symptoms that go along with that are pain, bloating, diarrhea, gas. Typically stools are very loose and greasy, and they have a very, very foul smell. That can typically be how you can find out. Now, you can test for both of these conditions. As far as IBS is concerned, to my knowledge, there is no actual testing that can take place with IBS. You can have it with constipation, diarrhea, or both. They kind of can go back and forth. Also, it's typically triggered by specific foods. So elimination diet is something that I recommend actually with all of these, because it's how you find out what you're going to tolerate best, what you're not going to tolerate, what's not going to agree with you. With IBS, similar symptoms. You get pain and cramping, a lot of bloating and gas typically when you're eating something that you shouldn't, and there will sometimes be mucus in your stool with IBS. Again, some common things that trigger IBS are dairy products are typically very, very common. People that struggle with IBS typically cannot tolerate dairy at all. I'm one of those people. I have to minimize dairy significantly. Gluten can sometimes cause people to have IBS symptoms. It's just, again, individual issues, trigger specific issues. So I recommend, one, seeing your doctor if you think you have any of these conditions, and two, just minimizing what you're eating. Like if you're experimenting, pick one food that you're going to experiment with and eat it by itself, and then give yourself some time to see how you're going to tolerate it. And then if you don't tolerate it, you know that's a product that you need to eliminate from your diet or restrict significantly. So I hope this information has been helpful to you. The only really difference here is this gastroparesis, I think, would be very easy to diagnose just from the symptoms being so very immediate. There is a lot of diarrhea. There is typically a lot of nausea and vomiting immediately after eating. Celiac and IBS, those are a little bit different. These are not, to my knowledge, IBD, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. That's not the category that they fall into, my knowledge. But again, talk to your doctor about that. So I hope this has been helpful. If you have any other questions, or I can help provide any recipes to help if you struggle with one of these areas, just give me a shout. Thanks for tuning in.